Picture this. You're sitting in your room right now, and suddenly everything goes completely dark. Not nighttime dark, not power outage dark. I'm talking about the kind of darkness that humanity has never experienced. The sun just disappeared. Gone. Vanished into nothing. What happens in the first second? The first minute? The first day? You think you know, but what actually happens will blow your mind. Right now, 93 million miles away from where you're sitting, there's a massive nuclear fusion reactor pumping out more energy every single second than humanity has used in our entire existence. That's our Sunday, and we're completely, totally dependent on it for everything. Our weather, our food, our entire existence. But what if it just wasn't there anymore? What if this second, without any warning, it just vanished? The answer isn't what you think. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the first few minutes would be the most beautiful and terrifying moments in human history. Here's something most people don't realize about our relationship with the Sunday. We think of sunlight as this instant thing. You flip a switch, light appears. The sun shines, we see it. But that's not how it works at all. The light from the sun that's hitting your face right now actually left the sun over 8 minutes ago. It traveled 93 million miles through space to reach you. This delay is about to become the most important thing in human history. See, when we talk about the sun disappearing, we need to understand what that actually means. Are we talking about the sun just going dark, like someone turned off a light switch? Or are we talking about the sun literally vanishing from existence as if it was never there? The difference between these two scenarios is mind-blowing, and it determines whether humanity survives or dies in the next few hours. Let's say the sun just completely vanishes. Not goes dark, not explodes, not shrinks. Just completely disappears from existence as if someone deleted it from reality. What happens next will surprise you, because for the first 8 minutes and 20 seconds, absolutely nothing changes on Earth. Nothing. You're still reading this. Birds are still singing. People are still going about their day. The temperature doesn't drop. The lights don't go out. Everything is completely normal. This is because the last light that left the sun is still traveling toward us. It's racing through space at 186,000 miles per second, and it's got about 8 minutes left in its journey. During these 8 minutes, Earth is living on borrowed time, coasting on the final gift from a star that no longer exists. But here's where it gets weird. It's not just the light that's delayed. Gravity also travels at the speed of light. So for those same 8 minutes, Earth continues orbiting a sun that isn't there anymore. We're literally circling empty space, held in orbit by gravitational waves that are still reaching us from our vanished star. Let's walk through what happens minute by minute, because the timeline of events is absolutely crucial to understanding just how bizarre and terrifying this scenario really is. Minute 1 to 8. The calm before the storm. During these first 8 minutes, life on Earth continues exactly as normal. The International Space Station is still orbiting. Planes are still flying. Your coffee is still hot. People are still complaining about traffic. The sun disappeared, but nobody knows it yet. This is perhaps the most eerie part of the entire scenario. Somewhere around the world, it's daytime, and people are enjoying sunshine from a star that doesn't exist anymore. Scientists at observatories around the world are going about their normal routines. Solar physicists are studying data from a sun that vanished minutes ago. Weather forecasters are predicting sunny skies based on a star that's already gone. It's like watching a movie when you know the main character is about to die, but they don't know it yet. The plants are still photosynthesizing. Solar panels are still generating electricity. People are still getting sunburned at beaches. Everything that depends on the sun is still working perfectly, running on the final stream of energy from our deleted star. Minute 8:20, the moment everything changes. Then it happens. The last photon of sunlight reaches Earth, and suddenly everything changes at once. The sky doesn't gradually dim like a sunset. It doesn't slowly fade like clouds covering the Sunday. One moment there's daylight, and the next moment, the entire day side of Earth plunges into complete darkness. But this isn't just darkness. This is a darkness humans have never experienced. When the sun sets, we still have reflected light from the moon, stars twinkling in the sky, the faint glow of distant galaxies. But remember, the sun isn't just gone, it vanished completely. And when a star vanishes, something else happens that most people don't think about. The sun doesn't just provide light, it also blocks light. Right now, during the day, you can't see stars because the sun's brightness drowns them out. But when the sun vanishes, not only do you lose its light, but suddenly you can see everything it was hiding. The moment the sun disappears, the entire day side of Earth suddenly has a perfect view of the night sky. Picture this. You're outside on a sunny afternoon, and suddenly you're plunged into darkness. But above you is the most spectacular view of the universe anyone has ever seen. The Milky Way blazes across the sky in broad daylight. Distant galaxies become visible. The entire cosmos that was hidden behind the sun's glare suddenly reveals itself. For about 30 seconds, this might be the most beautiful sight in human history. People would be pointing at the sky in amazement, thinking they're witnessing some kind of incredible astronomical event. Social media would explode with posts about this amazing cosmic light show. But then reality would start to set in. The first hour, confusion and panic. Within minutes, astronomers around the world would be frantically trying to figure out what happened. Telescopes would be pointed at where the sun should be, finding absolutely nothing. Not a black hole, not a collapsed star, not even empty space with a gravitational signature. Nothing. It would be as if the sun never existed. The first theory would be some kind of massive solar eclipse, but eclipses are predictable, and we'd know if one was supposed to happen. The second theory might be some kind of equipment failure. Maybe every solar observation instrument on Earth malfunctioned at the same time. But as minutes pass and the darkness continues, reality would set in. Emergency broadcasts would begin. The president would be awakened and briefed on a situation that no emergency protocol ever anticipated. How do you tell 7 billion people that the sun just disappeared? How do you maintain order when you're announcing the end of the world? But here's the thing about human psychology. We're incredibly good at denial when faced with impossible situations. For the first few hours, many people would convince themselves this is temporary. Maybe the sun will come back. Maybe this is some kind of natural phenomenon we don't understand yet. Maybe it's an elaborate hoax or some kind of mass hallucination. The temperature wouldn't drop noticeably in the first hour. Earth's atmosphere and oceans hold a lot of heat, and it takes time for that heat to radiate away into space. So, for the first few hours, the weather would stay relatively normal. This would actually make the denial easier. See? It's still warm. This can't be that serious. Hours 2 to 24. The new reality. But as hours pass, the situation would become undeniable. The temperature would start dropping, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Without the sun's energy constantly warming the atmosphere, Earth would begin its journey toward becoming a frozen wasteland. Plants would stop photosynthesizing immediately, but they wouldn't die right away. Trees and larger plants can survive for weeks without sunlight. But smaller plants, Algae and phytoplankton, the foundation of almost every food chain on Earth, would begin dying within days. The wind patterns would change dramatically. Wind is caused by temperature differences in the atmosphere. And without the sun heating different parts of Earth differently, the complex wind systems we rely on would begin to break down. Weather as we know it would cease to exist. But here's something interesting. The ocean currents wouldn't stop immediately. The massive circulation patterns in our oceans are driven partly by temperature differences, but also by the Earth's rotation and the shape of the ocean basins. These currents carry enormous amounts of heat around the planet, so coastal areas near warm ocean currents would stay relatively warm for weeks or even months. Week 1. Adaptation and desperation. After the initial shock, humanity would go into survival mode. Every greenhouse on Earth would become invaluable. Indoor farms with artificial lighting would suddenly be worth more than gold. People would raid garden centers for grow lights and seeds. The few hydroponic farms and vertical farming facilities around the world would become the most important places on the planet. Power grids would face unprecedented demand as everyone cranks up their heating systems. But here's a cruel irony. Many power plants depend on water cooling systems that rely on rivers and lakes. As temperatures drop, these water sources would begin freezing, making it harder to generate the electricity everyone desperately needs. Nuclear power plants would actually become humanity's best friend in this scenario. They don't depend on sunlight, wind, or flowing water. They just need nuclear fuel and cooling systems. Countries with lots of nuclear power would have a significant survival advantage. The psychological impact would be enormous. Humans evolved under the Sunday, our circadian rhythms, our vitamin D production. Our entire biology is built around the cycle of day and night, summer and winter. Suddenly, living in permanent darkness would drive many people into deep depression. Seasonal affective disorder would become a global epidemic. But humans are incredibly adaptable. Communities would form around any available heat source. Libraries, schools, and community centers with backup generators would become refugee centers. People would share resources, pool their knowledge, and work together in ways we rarely see outside of major disasters. Month 1. The die-off begins. This is when the real horror begins. Without photosynthesis, the bottom of the food chain collapses. Small insects and animals that depend on plants would die first. Then the animals that eat those animals. Then the animals that eat those animals. It would be like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The ocean would fare better initially. Deep-sea ecosystems that depend on thermal vents rather than sunlight would continue normally. But the surface ocean ecosystems, which produce most of the world's oxygen, would collapse rapidly. Speaking of oxygen, here's something most people don't realize. We wouldn't run out of breathable air for a long time. The atmosphere contains enough oxygen to last for thousands of years, even if all oxygen production stopped immediately. But the quality of the air would change as plants stop absorbing carbon dioxide. Temperatures would continue dropping. The average global temperature would fall below freezing within a month. But remember, this is just the average. Some places would get much colder, much faster. Areas far from oceans, especially at high altitudes, would become uninhabitable within weeks. But equatorial regions near large bodies of water would stay relatively warm for months. The massive thermal mass of the oceans would act like a giant battery, slowly releasing stored heat. Places like Hawaii, coastal areas of Africa, and small islands would become the most valuable real estate on Earth. Month 2 to 6, the new ice age. By the second month, most of Earth's surface would be below freezing. Snow and ice would begin covering vast areas that had never seen winter. The Amazon rainforest would be buried under snow. The Sahara Desert would become a frozen wasteland. But the cold wouldn't be the only problem. Without the water cycle driven by solar energy, weather patterns would become increasingly chaotic before finally settling into a new, much simpler pattern. Most precipitation would stop, but the little moisture left in the atmosphere would fall as snow and never melt again. Rivers would freeze solid, but the ocean would take much longer. Seawater freezes at about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and the thermal mass of the oceans is enormous. The surface would develop a layer of ice, but underneath, vast amounts of liquid water would remain for months or even years. This is actually crucial for humanity's survival. Coastal communities with access to the liquid ocean underneath the ice would have water, fish, and a relatively stable temperature. The ocean ice would act like insulation, keeping the water below from freezing solid. Volcanic activity would become incredibly important. Areas near active volcanoes would be oases of warmth in an increasingly frozen world. Geothermal vents, hot springs, and volcanic regions would become the most desirable places on Earth. Iceland, with its abundant geothermal energy, would suddenly become a promised land for survivors. Year 1. The long night. After a full year without the sun, Earth would be transformed beyond recognition. The average temperature would have dropped to around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the atmosphere would still be breathable, but water vapor would freeze and fall as snow, making the air incredibly dry. The oceans would be frozen solid on top, but liquid underneath in many areas. This underwater ocean would become a completely isolated ecosystem, cut off from the surface world. Marine life that survived the initial die-off would adapt to this new reality. But here's where it gets interesting. Humans are incredibly resourceful. Small communities would survive around geothermal sources, nuclear power plants, and in well-insulated underground facilities. These communities would develop entirely new ways of living. Mushroom farming would become crucial. Fungi don't need sunlight, just organic matter to decompose. Communities would carefully manage compost and waste to grow mushrooms for food. Any remaining livestock would be incredibly valuable, not just for meat, but for milk, eggs, and fertilizer. Technology would regress in some ways, but advance in others. Computers and electronics would still work fine in the cold, as long as they had power. Communities with access to 3D printers and manufacturing equipment would have huge advantages. The ability to make tools, spare parts, and equipment would mean the difference between thriving and dying. Years 2 to 10. The new civilization. Assuming some humans survived the first year, what would happen next? Earth would settle into its new reality as a rogue planet, a world without a star, drifting through space with only geothermal energy to keep it warm. The survivors would be living in small, isolated communities clustered around heat sources. These communities would be like space colonies, completely self-sufficient and cut off from the rest of the world. They'd develop their own cultures, their own ways of surviving, their own technologies adapted to life in permanent winter. Trade between communities would be incredibly dangerous but essential. Expeditions across the frozen wasteland to exchange goods, knowledge, and genetic diversity would be like Arctic exploration missions. These journeys would become legendary, with successful traders becoming heroes in this new world. Nuclear fuel would be more valuable than gold. Any community with access to uranium or thorium would have a massive advantage. They could power heating systems, grow lights for food production, and manufacturing equipment. Nuclear engineers would be the most important people in this new civilization. But here's something fascinating. In some ways, life might actually become easier for the survivors. With no weather to speak of, no storms, no seasonal changes, the environment would be completely predictable. Once you've adapted to the cold and solved the food problem, daily survival would follow a consistent routine. The night sky would be absolutely spectacular. With no light pollution and a completely clear atmosphere, survivors would have an unobstructed view of the entire universe. Astronomy would likely become a major part of the culture, both for navigation and for the psychological comfort of understanding our place in the cosmos. But here's the most mind-blowing part of this entire scenario, and it's something that completely changes how we think about Earth's survival. The planet wouldn't actually freeze solid. You see, Earth has a secret heat source that most people never think about. Deep below our feet, the Earth's core is still molten hot from the planet's formation billions of years ago, plus heat generated by radioactive decay. This geothermal energy constantly flows up through the planet's crust, warming the surface from below. Right now, this geothermal heat is tiny compared to the energy we get from the sunday. But without the sun, it becomes the only game in town. And here's the shocking truth. It's enough to keep parts of Earth above the freezing point of water indefinitely. Areas with high geothermal activity, places like Iceland, Yellowstone, parts of New Zealand, and Japan, would remain warm enough for liquid water and possibly even plant growth. These places would become the last refuges of life on Earth, small oases of warmth in a frozen world. But it gets even more incredible. Deep underground, where geothermal heat is strongest, temperatures would remain comfortable for human survival. Natural caves, mine shafts, and underground facilities near geothermal sources would maintain temperatures well above freezing permanently. This means that Earth wouldn't become a completely dead, frozen rock. It would become something much stranger. A planet with a frozen surface but pockets of warmth scattered around like hidden gems. Life would retreat underground and cluster around geothermal vents, but it would survive. In the deepest parts of the ocean, where underwater volcanic vents create their own ecosystems, life would continue almost normally. These deep-sea communities already exist independently of sunlight, getting their energy from chemicals dissolved in the water around volcanic vents. They'd be completely unaffected by the sun's disappearance. Over millions of years, life on Earth might actually adapt and evolve to thrive in this new reality. Evolution would favor organisms that can survive in cold temperatures and low light conditions. Eventually, Earth might develop entirely new ecosystems based on geothermal energy instead of solar energy. But here's the most incredible possibility of all. If humans manage to survive long enough, we might actually develop the technology to replace the sun artificially. Advanced nuclear fusion reactors, massive orbital mirrors, or other technologies we can't even imagine yet could potentially restore energy and warmth to Earth's surface. Think about it this way. Losing the sun would force humanity to become a truly space-faring civilization almost immediately. We'd have to master fusion power, closed-loop life support systems, underground construction, and dozens of other technologies just to survive. The humans who emerge from this catastrophe would be far more advanced and capable than we are today. So what would really happen if the sun suddenly vanished? For 8 minutes and 20 seconds, absolutely nothing. Then Earth would plunge into darkness and begin a rapid transformation into a frozen world. Most life would die within months, but not all of it. Humans could potentially survive in small communities around geothermal heat sources, underground facilities, and near nuclear power plants. We'd lose most of our technology and population, but we wouldn't go completely extinct. Earth itself would never freeze completely solid because of geothermal energy from the planet's core. Over thousands of years, the survivors might develop new civilizations adapted to life on a rogue planet. Over millions of years, life itself might evolve new forms that don't depend on sunlight at all. And eventually, if we became advanced enough, we might even figure out how to replace the sun with artificial energy sources. The scariest part of this scenario isn't the cold or the darkness. It's how quickly our entire civilization would collapse once we lost the single energy source everything depends on. But the most hopeful part is how resilient life really is, and how creative humans can be when our survival is on the line. Right now, as you're watching this, you're completely dependent on a nuclear fusion reactor 93 million miles away. Every breath you take, every bite of food you eat, every warm day you enjoy exists because of that distant star. We live our entire lives balanced on the edge of cosmic forces so large and powerful that we can barely comprehend them. But we also live on a planet that has its own sources of energy, its own ways of supporting life, and we're part of a species that has already proven it can survive ice ages, volcanic winters, and mass extinctions. If the sun vanished tomorrow, it would be the greatest catastrophe in human history. But it might not be the end of human history. The sun gives us life, but Earth gives us hope. And sometimes that's enough to survive even the impossible. Hit subscribe if you want to explore more impossible scenarios that will change how you see our universe.